people who grew up before smartphones, what is something that the newer generation won't get to experience? Story 1: A life that's not recorded. The ability to make mistakes and not have them follow you online for the rest of your life. They'll never grasp the level of anonymity we enjoyed as a society. Story 2: You could go to the record store or movie rental store, shop for music, and there would be other people there who like the same music as you. Now the record store is on your phone, and there is nobody in there to talk to. Story 3: The joy of slamming a phone receiver down in someone's ear when they pissed you off. It wasn't just the click of a call disconnecting, there was an actual loud bang when you did it, very satisfying in the moment. The busy signal that meant you couldn't reach someone because they were on the phone was frustrating, but looking back at it now, it kept our lives more simple than they are now. Story 4: The joys of leaving your home in the morning with a pocket full of coins and knowing that not only were you not expected back until sundown, but they couldn't find you even if they wanted to. Well, I can still remember the 6-digit phone numbers of my 3 closest friends, my parents' house at the time, and our next-door neighbors. My parents were over there all the time, especially during summer. Story 5: Mom, I'm going to ride my bike. Okay, honey, be back before dinner. Proceed to go and get into absolutely ridiculous and often unsafe situations in places my parents didn't even know existed while they had zero way of contacting or finding me and my friends. How was riding bikes, honey? Oh good, we just rode up the bike path to So and SOS house and played some video games as in processing some sort of trauma because we just almost got killed for some reason. Story 6: Having fun arguing about daft things that you could solve easily by Googling. Who was the actress in such and such? What year did that happen? I miss those daft pub chats. Story 7: A sort of freedom that is hard to explain. Even if you get rid of your smartphone now, society has a different view of that and you will be blamed for your decision. Also, there was a focus on creating that was bigger. Story 8: Born in 78. Someone brought up what we did on our work breaks before smartphones, and that was weirdly kinda nostalgic. ID bullshit with coworkers, read a magazine, everyone always had a book on hand. As technology advanced, someone with a Game Boy, the DS was really popular, but sometimes people would just listen to their iPod. Not trying to be old man, things were better back in my day about it, but just carrying around long-form content and utilizing it, like it was easy and encouraged, or you'd get like a 15-minute break at work, couldn't really go anywhere, so you'd be sitting in the break room and just bullshit about the day with other coworkers or get to know them. You were on your break and wanted to relax, unwind, so everyone tended to be cordial. Story 9: Using a payphone to place a collect call and cramming your entire message into the state your name pause. Would you like to accept a collect call from mom? Pick me up at the mall. Story 10: Your boss can't get a hold of you if you don't want them to, and that was perfectly acceptable because it was the norm. These days many employers expect someone to be available by phone 24/7, and to me that's BS. Story 11: The lack of pressure. I was a teen in the 80s. I have told my kids who are teens I wish they could have one summer in 1986, just so they could experience what life is like without the contestant fire hose of social media posts and ads and messages. And expectation that you have to constantly check your socials and post about your awesome life. Teens now live under the weight of insane social pressure. Story 12: Playing outside in the roads. I remember being outside most of the day and even at night just running around with friends playing games and football. It is kinda cultural shock for me nowadays to see kids playing outside. Story 13: The telephone on a special table in the hall, the only one in the entire house, and a small timer to ensure you didn't run up a big bill. Sometimes the dial was locked so only incoming calls, or was that just in my house? Story 14: The satisfaction of slamming the phone down when hanging up on someone. Crank calls, looking up numbers in phone books and facts in encyclopedias. Talking on the phone for hours. Now we text as a warning or permission to call, knowing a plethora of phone numbers by memory. Story 15: I'm sure most of these have already been mentioned, but being forced to have face-to-face interaction, playing outside, having to come up with your own ways to kill time, being able to do something without it being recorded, having a follower count not influence who wants to be your friend. Story 16: Just rocking up at your local bar in your 20s after work and seeing who's there. I actually got close to a few friends of friends this way. It made me mingle outside my friend zone more. Story 17: Hanging out with friends and having to come up with games outside or stay up late talking about silly things, with the ideas only you and your silly little friends can dream up, influenced by your personal experiences in your day-to-day life and stories you hear by the spoken word. Story 18: Accepting that you have no clue about which actor was in that movie, or whether Tina Turner is dead or just old, or what the weather will be like in 2 weeks. Rather than oh, let me Google that. I'm guilty of it myself, but it's still annoying sometimes. We're having a good conversation. Who cares? Why pull out your phone now and search for this or that? Story 19: Predicting the future. Before smartphones, if you were at your computer, you knew someone was gonna call so before the phone rang. I'm not gonna say how, if you know, you know. Story 20: When I was a kid, parents did not know where their child is. Just that they are out, that was normal, at least in my hometown. Rule in my family was, I had to be home by the time the streetlights are turned on. Story 21: The ability to just off. You can still do it by leaving your phone at home for the day or whatever, but it's not really socially acceptable. If someone wants to get a hold of you, you'll come home to piles of calls and voicemails as the people on the other end assume you're dead. In the 90s, it wasn't just socially acceptable to disappear for a day, it was assumed that's how things would work. If someone couldn't get a hold of you, they just shrugged and dealt with it. If you went out shopping or something, you got home when you got home and that was that. Even disregarding how difficult it is for people to willing switch off from digital engagement, which is a huge problem in its own right. The shift from people assuming you're unavailable and feeling lucky if they manage to connect, to assuming you're available and being offended or worried if they can't connect, is a truly massive shift in how humans interact with each other. Story 22. Calling collect from a payphone. Bonus points if you could squeeze the whole message into the name portion so the receiver didn't have to accept charges. You have a collect call from Hyman Jordan's house. Can you pick me up a 3? Story 23. Speaking about smartphones. Living without all this phone scrolling, I remember my first phone I had as a kid, a simple Nokia brick. Back then a phone was mostly just a phone. It had 3 simple games and a bunch of ringtones, and it was just enough. And if we would go further back, then landline telephones. For kids now it must seem like a total retro. Story 24. Having a life of not posting photos to social media to build an ego. We grew up mostly not giving a what other PPL thought of our looks and not judging others based on looks or clothes. Story 25. You only had the TV, radio, news or newspapers to tell you what was happening around the world. You had to actively hunt out your news or you would know nothing. Nowadays we're bombarded with information, news, advertising and propaganda constantly. I definitely think life was far less stressful and depressing than in part due to that. Story 26. I'm old, but watching people, kids, teens, adults, and the seeming addiction so many have to their phones, I routinely think about how thankful I am to have grown up in '80s. We rode bikes all around town, were blissfully ignorant about genocides on the other side of the planet and played with toy robots. You didn't have to know about everything all the time, and it was glorious. Story 27. Writing down directions while on the phone with your friend, then hopping in the car with those scribbled directions and hoping they're right as you go on the hunt for your actual location. Story 28. Playing outside from dawn till dusk on weekends. Used to do that as a kid every day after school and all day on weekends. This was just before iPhones took off in 2012. Saw some kids in the park at the weekend when I took my son. They were all just sat on a bench on their phones. Story 29. When I was a kid, I'd have to ask my mom if I could get on my screen name since our internet was through AOL dial-up. My nieces have no idea. LMAO edit to add another good one. Last time I visited my sister the weather was pretty bad, and I told my older niece that when I was her age 5, I wasn't able to watch my cartoons after school if the weather was bad because the signal was too bad. She was horrified and didn't believe me. Story 30. Real, genuine downtime, virtually unplugged from every device, unreachable by the boss, by work, by needy, nagging family members, freedom from constant screen addictions, no need for some kind of affirmation from social media apps, game apps. Story 31. Being able to speak about a subject you know or studied and not having to argue with someone that does a quick Google search without verifying the information. Reading a paper map in the passenger seat and relying on your sense of direction or having misadventures from the lack thereof. Receiving lettered mail from friends, family that don't like talking on the phone. Story 32. The freedom of not always being connected, of not always being expected to be there, the freedom of not knowing every little thing that happens around the world, whether good or bad. It was your life and you lived it with and amongst those around you, not feeling influenced or pressured by the standards of today. And people enjoyed that life. Story 33. Untwisting the phone cord, calling to get the time of day, 5 TV stations, NBC, ABC, CBS, PBS, and an independent, BW TVs, and the excitement when your family got a color TV, having to watch the program when it was on because you couldn't record it. If you missed it you had to wait for the summer reruns. Story 34. Memorizing multiple commonly used phone numbers. Parents, family, friends, never seemed to have any of it written down as a kid, just having to wait until someone got home if you needed to speak to them. Carrying change in case you needed to make phone call when out and about. Story 35. When you wanted to hang out with your mates, you actually had to go knock on for them. If they weren't and you'd go check out all the classic spots. Don't think I've ever been fitter than those years. Story 36. Knowing you just had to be there. Nothing was recorded unless you had one of those massive camcorders. People got together to tell stories of shenanigans. Story 37. Having meet-up spots at the mall. You'll be here at XXXX, but if we miss, you'll be at this place at XXXX. Last call is in front of the Macy's at 6 o'clock p.m. Story 38. The yellow pages, paper maps, humans answering all phones, pronouncing the letter T, no vocal fry, tattoo-free society, suppressed racism, lead particles in the air, unrestrained industrial pollution, few to zero homeless, public mental hospitals, all-wheel drum brakes, bench car seats, refrigerators that last your whole childhood, communist witch hunts, drop drills, men's clubs, women's clubs. American-made everything, really good public schools, inexpensive medical care, gold at 40 ounces. But you couldn't buy it pure. Just 18 karat or less jewelry, handwriting, girdles, pantyhose, really funny TV commercials, variety shows, weird local weathermen, roof antennas, lots of assassinations, magazines, piles of newspapers, dress codes, giant sedans everywhere with really smooth rides, very long TV commercials, jello molds, molded jello, smoking all the time, anywhere, sheet metal toys, real seesaws, unrestricted outside playing and adventure, cards and spokes, the donut man, the milkman door to door. Salesman, motor oil drip stains everywhere, every parking spot, businessmen all on speed, the Cold War, fear of nuclear war at any moment, the Iron Curtain, first thing on the news every single night how many killed in Vietnam, board games up the yin-yang, lots of airlines competing against each other and only hiring model-esque stewardesses, suppressed left-handedness, homemade clothing, only 3 TV networks, locally produced children's shows, no chargers, D-cells, C-cells, cheap concerts. Cheap Disneyland. Lunchtime now. Story 39. Mom driving around in her car looking for your cause you were supposed to be home an hour ago. The more driving, the angrier she got. Now I can find my son's location even if he doesn't answer. Story 40. Latchkey kids. My mom came home from work and caught me playing Run Around the Shoe, which is exactly what it sounds like. The rules were whatever I made up right then, but I think mostly we all had to learn to self-entertain by whatever means we had. So, we did a lot of hanging out back in the day or playing ball in the street. Whenever you didn't have something to do, you kind of made something to do. I've noticed that gadget-obsessed people young and old alike don't seem to tolerate being bored very well. Story 41. Hanging out with humans and doing hood rat stuff without consequences because nobody was recording you. Literally the best of times were pre-smartphone. I say this as I am typing on a smartphone. I would throw this thing away in a second to go back to like 1999. Brilliant times. Story 42. I want to say the ability for someone like Cliff Clavin who can make up facts and no one around him can dispute it because people didn't care unlimited access to knowledge on them. Then again, we've seen how much people prefer to just hear what they want rather than actual facts. Story 43. Growing up in the 90s was magical. Bonfires, wild truth or dare games, the spontaneity and the fun things we would do in the moment was amazing. High school parties, homecoming, prom, these are things that are hard to describe to kids today. Unless you experienced it, it's really hard to convey to kids today the sheer magic of what it was like growing up in the 90s. Story 44. We used to have pagers, and with this pager, you would get a number message, there were no letters, and once you got this beep or page, you would then have to find a phone to call them on. A lot of the times we used payphones, or if we were by a home phone we would call from someone's home. But also the fun thing about pagers was you could page somebody in code. 143 was I love you and 43 was F you, all. Story 45. As a kid I'd ride my bike to my friend's house down the street and knock on the door or call for him by the gate. Sometimes you didn't get an answer so you went on your way. It's just the way it was. Story 46. Having 0 pictures from 3 summer seashore college party houses. Getting letters in mail with a pic from a girl guy. Waiting to hear a song on the radio. Going to the bank on payday with UR check. Arcades at the mall. The effort and planning as an early teen boy to score a girly mag. Whole planning sessions with friends. Story 47. A life without phones. You had to have grit to find people. You spent a good portion of the day daydreaming, patiently waiting for your favorite song to come on a radio, MSN Messenger. Story 48. Calling collect, and instead of saying your name, quickly saying everything you need to say so the person doesn't need to accept the collect call charge, on a payphone. Story 49. Having to call home from school to ask if you can get off bus with friend, then he has to call and ask if I can come over, then I have to call my parents back letting them know they are okay with it, but pick me up at 7 p.m., took around 30 minutes and 3 to 4 phone calls on one landline phone the school has, now we have group text. Story 50. Not knowing something, you get in an argument with someone about some fact and then you just have to agree to look it up later or more likely never. Story 51. Seen a bar in any town in America. Hey man, who do you think had more home runs, Frank Thomas or David Ortiz? I'm not sure. Yeah, me neither. Anyway, you want to split some nachos. Story 52. Talking to someone on the phone in your room, but a thought that your parents might pick up the other phone and listen in on your conversation. I don't know if this happened in my younger years, but it certainly was a possibility. Story 53. Went to a Beyoncé concert and both my friend and mine's phones died. I could no longer contact the Uber I had ordered and lost my easiest method of payment. For the first time in years I rode the subway with her downtown where there were more hotels and restaurants to use a phone for a cab or hail one old-fashioned like. Had we not been in our 30s, I don't think it would have occurred to us that these places traditionally have cab services and phone for semi-public use. People watched way more without my phone and appreciated the little nuances around me, both because I wasn't buried in my phone but also because I normally would have been in my car bubble secluded away. Same for waiting for the cab. A lot of small interactions are missed when everything is streamlined, which is pros and cons. Story 54. It was so easy to skip class the day, even if they called home on landline, nobody was there, pretty sure the bot receptionist sends out WhatsApps and emails now. Story 55. Stories. You couldn't just Google everything or show a picture video. If you saw something amazing or someone else did, it would be shared over the years like folklore followed by other people sharing the same kind of stories. No matter if most of it was made up and exaggerated, it was just a good time listening to people share their lives and experiences verbally and picturing the things. You just didn't have to worry about everything being factually correct. Story 56. Not being available. 247. If you didn't catch the phone call, then you just had to hope they got back to you or catch up with them the next time you see each other. Story 57. Getting told by your friend's mom that your mom called for you to get home because dinner is ready, and getting scolded because you weren't at the friend's house you said you'd be. Story 58. A lack of spam robocalls. I never pick up my phone calls these days unless it's from someone I have saved on my phone or am expecting an important call that day. Story 59. About with a bus route pamphlet trying to work out the timings of 2 connecting bus routes to get across town. Delays were a nightmare. Be home at dark. Honestly, I think about this all the time. Crime rates were so much higher back then too, but you just got to be free. It being totally normal to just go knock on someone's door to see what was up. I think the loneliness epidemic exists because of that. My first couple places, during the flip phone era, had a rotating cast of friends and girls that just stopped by. I wanted a cell phone for a while, but I was the age when kids didn't have them. I was 19 before getting a phone because I was selling them. As soon as I did that sucked. If you didn't answer, it was like an affront to the caller, as if you didn't have other going on. Now, kids get them young and Google or Zuck stay listening to your every word trying to get you to buy something. Story 60. Walking in public, and everyone watching where they are going. I hate going in public now with smartphones and everyone playing with them all the time, having to remember all 30 of your friends' numbers by heart. Story 61. Before texting we passed notes in class. The skill was doing it without the teacher seeing you, because if you were caught, sometimes the teacher would make you read the note out loud to the whole class. I still have a box full of notes from my school friends somewhere. We learned all kinds of cool ways to fold up the paper too. Story 62. Being blissfully unaware of influencers, celebrities and just plain idiots, with every minute detail of their stupid lives, not knowing about fights, conquests and details, public blowouts or general misbehavior of average human beings. Story 63. Having your parents yell at you to disconnect from the internet so they can make a telephone call. Being able to leave the house without any text messages coming your way to add something to the shopping list. Not being able to look up directions to your destination or to nearby businesses unless you paid an arm and leg for a GPS. We used to have to get on the dial-up or slower than now broadband internet and type in our destination into MapQuest to print out. Story 64. Being lost, as in having to bust out a 500-page physical map from the trunk in the middle of the Nevada desert. I genuinely haven't felt physically lost with nothing to do about it for so long. Story 65. Navigating the highways with paper maps. Drove from Baltimore to Boston for a game in Fenway in 1996. Stopped by Yankee Stadium in New York to see a game there the next day. Still amazed we found either place. Story 66. Not having pressure through social media to look like a model. Being yourself. Going offline once out of school. Enjoying moments as they are versus recording them and not enjoying the actual moment. Story 67. Being able to BS in a conversation without looking up your facts. LOL. Mostly a good thing. Being bored and having to get creative with your time. Getting into trouble fun without it being videotaped. Story 68. Wandering aimlessly around the neighborhood until you come across some other kids. It didn't even seem to matter if we were friends in school or not. We were just happy to waste the time with whoever was around to waste the time with. Story 69. The true expression of anger that only comes from slamming a phone. If you heard that crumpled clank, you knew you were. That click might as well be them reloading a gun. Worse, the conversation's over, so talking's no longer an option. Story 70. Think of every time you've used your phone in an emergency, you needed help, had to contact somebody right now, or otherwise needed to contact somebody. Now imagine you couldn't have. Everybody is talking about all the negatives, but there are clear upsides to them.